Blind date gone wrong. The hapless mechanic ended up at the wrong table and met the CEO's daughter, who was living with paralysis. You're at the wrong table, but would you maybe stay for a while? Charlotte Whitmore's voice was gentle, hesitant, but not fearful. Her eyes, a clear, oceanic blue beneath soft, golden curls, met Jake's with curiosity and something more, a hint of loneliness. She was seated in a sleek, modern wheelchair, dressed in a pastel blue gown that appeared both elegant and subtly defiant. The soft lighting of the upscale restaurant cast a gentle glow around her, yet her smile carried a quiet ache. Jake Turner froze mid-squat as he lowered himself into the chair, his work-worn hands hovering awkwardly over the linen napkin. He looked around, confused. This is table 7, right? He asked, holding up a crumpled piece of paper with the number scribbled in pen. It is, Charlotte replied, her lips curving slightly. But you're probably not who I was supposed to meet tonight. Jake scratched the back of his neck, his cheeks flushing. He was dressed in his best button-up shirt, still wrinkled from being crammed in the back of his closet, and his boots, although freshly wiped, bore the unmistakable scuffs of a man who worked with his hands. Then I guess I really am in the wrong place, he said, starting to stand up again. Charlotte paused. But if you don't mind sitting with me anyway, I wouldn't mind a little company. He blinked, surprised. Really? She added with a wry smile. I mean, it's already awkward. Might as well embrace it. Jake sat down. And just like that, two strangers, both at the wrong table, began a conversation that would change everything. What neither of them realized was that fate, or perhaps a very convenient mix-up, had brought them together. Charlotte had arrived at the fancy restaurant that evening for a blind date set up through a discreet dating app that didn't use profile photos. After years of hiding behind headlines and expectations while sitting in her wheelchair, she'd hoped this anonymous approach might finally allow her to meet someone who saw her, not her status or her disability. Her match, a man named Daniel G., was supposed to meet her at table 7. Jake, on the other hand, had never even considered using a dating app. His best friend, Marcus, had signed him up as a joke, filled out a fake profile, and even managed to secure a dinner reservation using a promotional voucher he'd won from a radio contest. The plan was simple. Jake shows up, enjoys a free steak, and maybe meets someone interesting. What Marcus neglected to mention was that he'd accidentally, or perhaps intentionally, put Jake down for table 7. So, when Jake arrived, scanned the room, and spotted a beautiful woman sitting alone at the only open table labeled 7, he assumed the universe was being unusually kind to him. And Charlotte, expecting a stranger anyway, thought perhaps her date had simply arrived unannounced. Neither of them suspected the truth. They talked not about wealth, not about careers, not about wheelchairs or expectations. Jake told her about his love for grilled cheese sandwiches and classic rock music. Charlotte shared her passion for thunderstorms and vintage film cameras. They joked about the tiny forks on the table and how neither of them knew what to do with them. Jake didn't ask about the wheelchair. Charlotte didn't mention her last name. For a while, it felt like the world had simply melted away until it didn't. The real Daniel appeared 25 minutes later, tall, overdressed, and radiating an air of entitlement. He stormed over to the table and froze when he saw Charlotte. His face twisted with disdain. Wait, you're in a wheelchair? This is a joke, right? The restaurant fell into a sudden hush. Chairs scraped against the floor as patrons turned to stare. Even the clinking of silverware paused in midair. Charlotte's face lost all color. Her hands tightened around her water glass. Jake slowly stood to his feet. He turned toward the man, his voice calm but firm. I'm the one sitting with her. Who are you? Daniel sneered. I'm her date. Jake took a step forward, positioning himself directly between Charlotte and the man. Not anymore. The silence deepened. Daniel scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out, leaving a palpable tension in his wake. Jake turned back to Charlotte, his expression softening. You okay? She nodded almost imperceptibly. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Jake shrugged. Yeah, I did. He gently pulled out her chair and asked, Do you want to get out of here? Charlotte hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. Yes, very much. And as they left the restaurant, both still unaware that they weren't meant to meet that night, something unspoken settled between them. The date might have been a mistake, but the connection felt undeniably real. Charlotte maneuvered her wheelchair away from the table, her fingers trembling slightly on the wheels. Jake followed a step behind, glancing back once at the empty chair where Daniel had stood moments earlier. Outside, the night air was cooler and calmer. The buzz of the restaurant faded behind them as they made their way down a narrow, tree-lined path that opened up into a small city park lit by soft, golden lamps. "I'm sorry," Jake said, his voice low. "I didn't mean to crash your night. I thought I was supposed to be at that table." Charlotte stopped by a bench and turned toward him. "You weren't supposed to be, but maybe I'm glad you were." Jake smiled, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "If you still want someone to eat with, I know a food truck not far from here. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Nothing fancy, but the guy remembers your name after one order." Charlotte tilted her head. "Grilled cheese sounds perfect." They walked, or rather, she wheeled, and he paced beside her. When they reached the truck, Jake ordered, adding, "Extra crispy edges, trust me." They took their food to the park bench, steam rising from the paper cups. Charlotte sipped her soup. "So, what's your story, Mr. Mechanic?" Jake laughed. "You already figured me out. You smell like engine grease and kindness," she teased. "I'm a fast learner." He looked down at his sandwich, then back up at her. "Well, my dad passed when I was 10. Mom worked nights at the hospital. I started fixing bikes in middle school, then cars by high school. Never had much, but my little sister, she just graduated college. Full ride. That's what mattered." Charlotte's expression softened. "You raised her." He nodded. "Best thing I ever did." She leaned back in her chair. "That's beautiful." Jake looked at her gently. "What about you?" Charlotte hesitated. Her fingers curled slightly around the cup in her lap. 3 years ago, car accident. It was raining. I was driving. Lost control. Jake waited, silent. "My lower spine was crushed. Doctors said I was lucky to live. Some days I'm not sure if that's true." Jake's eyes met hers, unwavering. "I think it is." She looked away for a moment, blinking. "Tonight was my first date since. I guess I thought if I hid everything, maybe someone could see me before they saw the chair." "I saw you," Jake said softly. She turned back toward him, surprised. "You were wearing a blue dress, hair like sunshine, telling a stranger about olives. That's what I saw." For a moment, she couldn't speak. As she reached for her drink, her grip slipped slightly. Juice spilled across her hand and lap. "Oh!" she gasped, instinctively pulling back. Without hesitation, Jake reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a clean handkerchief, slightly faded but neatly folded, and gently dabbed at her fingers. "It's okay. I've got it," he murmured, his hands careful and respectful. Charlotte's breath caught. He wasn't flustered. He wasn't overreacting. He just helped. Jake glanced up at her, his voice steady. "I wiped your hand because it's beautiful, not because I feel sorry for you." She froze. Something cracked quietly in her chest. Then, slowly, her lips curled into a smile. Not polite, not guarded, but real. A quiet, radiant smile that reached her eyes. Jake smiled back, folding the handkerchief and tucking it away. They finished their food in easy silence, letting the city hum around them. As they parted later that evening, Jake offered, "I don't know what tomorrow holds, but tonight I'm really glad I sat at the wrong table." Charlotte looked up at him, her eyes shimmering under the street light. "So am I." It began with coincidence, or what they still like to call coincidence, even after the third time. Jake was already at the corner diner when Charlotte wheeled in one misty morning. Her hair tied up in a loose bun, her cheeks pink from the early chill. He looked up from his coffee, surprised, and smiled like he had been waiting for her all along. "Let me guess," he said. "Black coffee, 2 sugars, and no pancakes because you're secretly judging me for mine." Charlotte laughed. "I never said that. You didn't have to. It's in the eyes. She rolled her eyes and joined him anyway. From that morning on, they accidentally met at the same places. The diner with the greasy hash browns. The park bench where the hot dog cart guy remembered Jake's name. The tiny movie theater that still used reels and had popcorn butter that soaked through the bag. Sometimes Charlotte would pretend it was a coincidence. Other times, she admitted she checked his garage window before deciding to go for a walk. Whatever it was, it felt easy. Jake never asked why she was in a wheelchair. He never flinched when she struggled with a ramp or took a little longer to get out of the car. What he did ask was, "What's your favorite smell? Do you believe in soulmates? What's something no one knows about you?" And he always listened, really listened, like every word she said was a treasure map. One drizzly afternoon, she surprised him at the garage with a bag of lunch and a stolen hour of her day. He was changing a tire in the rain, sleeves rolled up, hair soaked, his voice singing along to some old country tune under his breath. She watched from the car for a minute before getting out. He looked up and grinned. "You brought food. I may love you." She smirked. "It's just grilled cheese. It's the gesture that counts." They sat under the garage awning, rain pattering on the tin roof, biting into their sandwiches and wiping their hands on napkins that didn't do much. Jake pulled off his gloves and leaned back. "You know, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yeah. I used to sketch everything. Cars, trees, birds, even cereal boxes. Once I tried to draw my sister while she was crying, and she didn't talk to me for 3 days. She laughed. "Why'd you stop?" Jake's smile faded a little. "We couldn't afford the supplies. My mom was working nights and I had to help out more. Eventually, I traded pencils for socket wrenches, kept the lights on, but the dreams kind of dimmed." Charlotte was quiet for a moment, then reached into her tote bag. She pulled out a small sketchbook and flipped to a page. It was him. Jake crouched next to a car, rain pouring over him, muscles tense, expression focused. The light caught on his soaked hair, the strength in his arms, and something soft in the way he worked. "You drew this?" he asked, stunned. She nodded. "I had to. You looked like yourself." Jake stared at the drawing, speechless. "No one's ever drawn me before," he finally said. She shrugged, but her cheeks flushed. "I just wanted you to see how I see you." That night, Charlotte returned home later than usual. Her hands were cold, her body tired, but her heart was wide awake. When she opened her purse to put away her sketchbook, she found a small folded square of paper tucked between the pages. It was a note written in Jake's handwriting. Firm, a little uneven, but unmistakably his. She unfolded it slowly, her breath catching as she read, "I'd choose your smile over 1,000 steps." Charlotte sat in stunned silence. Then, without meaning to, she began to cry. Not from sadness, but from the kind of deep, overwhelming gratitude that fills your lungs like wind and breaks you open in the most beautiful way. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever seen past the chair, the whispers, the walls, but Jake had. And somehow, in the smallest, simplest note, he had given her something no one else had. The photo was grainy, but the headline was sharp enough to cut through steel. "Aries caught slumming. Billionaire's daughter seen canoodling with grease monkey mechanic." Charlotte stared at the tabloid on her tablet. The image showed her laughing beside Jake outside his garage, his hand gently resting on the back of her wheelchair. The caption beneath it read, "Love or lust for fortune?" Her stomach twisted. She hadn't seen the flash, hadn't noticed the shadow behind the dumpster, but now it was everywhere. News feeds, gossip blogs, whispers behind designer coffee cups. When she stepped into her father's office, the air felt cold despite the polished oak and warm lighting. William Whitmore didn't look up from his paper. "Close the door," he said curtly. Charlotte obeyed. He lifted the tabloid and held it up like a weapon. "Explain this." She sat straighter in her chair. "There's nothing to explain. I was spending time with someone I care about." "Someone," he repeated bitterly. "A mechanic with no pedigree, no future, who sees you as a payday?" Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "Jake isn't like that. Her father stood, his voice rising. You think he's with you for your charm? You're my only child, the public face of this empire, and you've become a joke. He didn't ask for any of this. He doesn't have to, Whitmore snapped. Men like him don't ask, they take. Charlotte clenched the arms of her chair. You don't know him. I know enough, her father said darkly. I had him investigated. She froze. You what? I know his financials, his work history, his criminal record. He doesn't have a record. Not the point, he growled. He's nothing. You can't build a future with nothing. Charlotte's voice trembled. I wasn't aware my future had to be approved like a business merger. Her father's gaze hardened. You want love? Fine. Find someone who understands your world, who doesn't fix flat tires for a living. She left without another word. Later that evening, she texted Jake to meet at the diner they'd grown to love. The neon lights flickered over vinyl booths and chipped mugs. She arrived early, trying to steady her breathing. Jake entered, wiping his hands on his jeans, his smile fading when he saw her expression. Everything okay? She forced a smile. Yeah, just a long day. They ordered the usual, eggs over easy for him, tea with lemon for her. Jake noticed her silence. You're quieter than usual. Charlotte stirred her tea, her eyes downcast. My father found out. Jake leaned back. And he's not happy. Jake sighed. Figured as much. She looked up, forcing casualness. Maybe we should cool things down. Just lay low for a bit. Jake's brows furrowed. Cool things down? Did I do something wrong? No, she said too quickly. It's just complicated. Jake studied her, reading every flicker of hesitation. Then softly, I don't need your father's approval or his money. I don't care about being accepted into any boardroom. I just need to know you're still you. She didn't answer. He leaned forward. Charlotte, I don't care if the world thinks I'm nobody. I just need to know the person I'm sitting across from is still the girl who smiled at grilled cheese and sketched me like I mattered. She blinked fast, swallowing hard, but her silence spoke louder than tears. Jake leaned back, the hurt in his eyes barely hidden. Right. He stood slowly, placing enough cash to cover both meals on the table. Charlotte opened her mouth, but stopped. He looked at her one last time. I don't need a title, Charlotte. I just need you to still be you. And then he turned. She didn't stop him. Instead, she wheeled herself out the back in trance into the night where no one could see her heartbreaking. Jake knew they were watching him. It started subtly. Unfamiliar cars parked across from the garage, strangers pretending to ask for oil changes. A man in a suit lingering near the shop entrance, pretending to check his phone. Then came the visit. A black sedan pulled up after closing. The man who stepped out wasn't large, but he carried the weight of authority like a badge. Crisp suit, cold eyes. I represent Mr. Whitmore, he said smoothly without offering a hand. Jake folded his arms. Of course you do. You've become an inconvenience. Jake said nothing. The man took a step closer. Let me be blunt. Walk away quietly. No more dinners. No more text messages. No more contact with Miss Whitmore. Jake's jaw clenched. Or what? The man smiled almost kindly. You know how fragile your license is. A small report here, a complaint there. Things happen. Inspections fail. Loans disappear. He slipped a card onto Jake's workbench. Be smart. Then he left. Jake stood there long after the tail lights vanished. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage, helplessness, and love. He stared at his phone. One missed call from Charlotte. He didn't call back. He couldn't, for her sake. Charlotte stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. 16 missed calls. All unanswered. The last time they'd spoken was at the diner. Since then, silence. She texted, Are you okay? Nothing. Please talk to me. Nothing. Jake, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push you away. Nothing. She started calling every night, letting it ring to voicemail, leaving messages. Her voice broke in the third one. She stopped trying after the seventh. But every morning, her first thought was still the same. Call him. Just try again. One night, after a week of silence, she found a small envelope in her apartment mailbox. No name, just her address written in careful print. She tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a single folded piece of paper and his handwriting so familiar it hurt. I can't walk beside you, Charlotte, but I'll always be just behind you, like a shadow that keeps you standing. This is not goodbye. It's just me keeping you safe. Jake. Her breath caught. She read it again and again. Then the paper slipped from her hand. No! Her scream echoed off the walls. She wheeled backward, knocking over the small table in her hallway. Her sketch pad scattered, pencils clattering across the floor. She slammed her fists into the arms of her chair, her eyes blazing with tears. Why? She cried. Why are you doing this? She pushed herself toward the door, flung it open, rolled into the empty hallway, and shouted down the silence. I don't want to be protected. I want you. No answer. Only the faint hum of a vending machine and the sharp sobs breaking from her chest. She wheeled back into her apartment and slammed the door shut. Then she did the only thing she hadn't done since the accident. She let herself fall apart. The rain came without warning. Thick, heavy drops soaked Charlotte's dress as she wheeled herself down the street. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her breath short and fast. She didn't care. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She just went. The bridge wasn't far, but every inch of the way felt heavier than it should. Her arms ached, her fingers were numb, but she kept pushing because the memory was stronger than the storm. It was her favorite place as a child, the old pedestrian bridge over the river. Her mother used to bring her there on warm evenings. They'd count the boats and throw breadcrumbs to the ducks. It was where her mother had once said, "You'll walk across this bridge on your own one day." That dream died the night of the accident, and now all she wanted was to reach it alone one last time. Charlotte turned onto the ramp, the wheels squeaking against the soaked pavement. The rain poured harder, blurring the lights of the city behind her. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. She made it halfway across when the front wheel jolted. "Come on," she whispered. The wheel was stuck in a crack between the boards. She rocked the chair gently, trying to dislodge it, but it didn't budge. Another tug. Nothing. And then headlights. From the far side of the bridge, a delivery truck appeared, moving faster than it should in the downpour. Charlotte waved frantically, screaming, "Stop!" But the driver couldn't see her in the rain. The bridge was narrow, visibility was low. She yanked at the wheels again, panic rising in her throat. The truck was too close now, too fast, too late. Suddenly, a shout cut through the storm. "I'm not ready to lose you again." A figure burst onto the bridge, sprinting through the rain. Jake. His boots slammed against the wet wood, slipping once, catching himself, his eyes locked on hers. Charlotte's lips trembled. Jake! In one motion, he reached her, grabbed the handles of her chair, and yanked with all his strength. The wheel tore loose. He spun the chair out of the truck's path just as it screamed past, horn blaring. They tumbled to the side, crashing onto the walkway. Jake's arms wrapped around her as they fell, shielding her body with his. The truck vanished into the rain. For a moment, there was only the sound of thunder, her heartbeat, and his breath against her ear. Charlotte clung to him, sobbing uncontrollably. Her fists gripped his soaked jacket. "I thought," she choked. "I thought you were gone for good." Jake cupped her face, rain running down his fingers like tears. "I tried to be. I thought staying away would protect you." Her eyes searched his, desperate and raw. "I don't need protection," she whispered. "I need you." Jake closed his eyes. "I couldn't stop thinking about you. Every second, every breath." Charlotte leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "Then don't leave again." "I won't." They stayed like that for a long moment, rain falling around them like a curtain, shielding them from the world. Two broken hearts stitched together by a single, impossible moment. Jake tightened his arms around her. "I love you, Charlotte." She looked up at him. "I love you too." They kissed slowly, deeply, rain mingling with tears, pain fading into warmth. And somewhere deep in her chest, the weight began to lift. The Whitmore estate was quiet when Charlotte returned. The rain from the night before had passed, leaving the garden glistening under pale morning sunlight. She rolled through the marble entryway, her wheels echoing softly against the tiles, past portraits of her ancestors. Men in suits, women in pearls, none of them smiling. At the top of the stairs, her father's study door was open. He sat at his massive desk, scanning papers as if the headlines about his daughter hadn't caused a corporate media storm just days ago. Charlotte entered, her hands calm but firm on the wheels. William Whitmore didn't look up. "Did you enjoy your walk in the rain?" he asked dryly. "I came to talk," Charlotte said evenly. He finally glanced at her, his eyes cold and his jaw set. "If this is about that mechanic again, don't even waste your breath." She met his gaze without flinching, her resolve firm. "Jake Turner is the man I love." His mouth twitched with disdain, a visible sign of his disapproval. "A man with no pedigree, no class, no vision? You actually think that's love? You've been manipulated, Charlotte, plain and simple." "No," she retorted, her voice sharpening with conviction. "I've been seen, heard, and respected. Things I haven't felt in this house for years, I might add." William rose from his chair and began pacing around the desk, looming over her as if to intimidate. But she refused to shrink back, standing her ground with unwavering determination. "I built everything you have," he declared, his voice booming. "The life you live, the name you carry. It was all earned through sacrifice and hard work. I won't let you throw it all away for some nobody who doesn't even belong in our world." "I don't want your world," Charlotte said, her voice trembling with the force of truth. "Not if it means choosing between you and my own happiness." "You'd leave the company?" he asked, stunned by her audacity. Charlotte nodded slowly, her eyes locked on his. "Yes. If you can't accept Jake, I will step away from Whitmore Properties. I won't live under your control any longer." The air in the room went still, thick with unspoken tension. A door creaked open behind them, breaking the silence. Jake stood in the doorway, his hands clean, his shirt pressed, but his eyes betrayed the nerves that churned beneath his composed exterior. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, stepping inside, his voice low but steady. William stared at him with undisguised contempt. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that." Jake nodded, acknowledging the truth in his statement. "Yes, sir, I do." He walked forward and stood beside Charlotte, then gave a respectful bow of his head. "I'm not here to ask for your blessing," he began, his voice sincere. "I know you think I'm not good enough for her, and maybe in your world, I never will be. I don't have the right last name. I fix cars for a living. I work the night shift. My hands are always dirty." He paused, glancing down at Charlotte with a tenderness that softened his features. "But I love your daughter with everything I have. I don't want her money. I don't need her name. I just want to stand beside her and give her the kind of life where she never feels small again." Charlotte blinked back tears, overwhelmed by his words. Jake turned back to her father, his expression resolute. "You can dig through my records, threaten my job, send people to tail me, but you can't scare me into leaving her." William's face darkened with anger. "You think that's courage?" Jake met his gaze without wavering. "No, sir. That's love." A silence descended upon the room, heavy with pride, fury, and emotions that remained unspoken. Charlotte reached for Jake's hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "You once told me to find someone who would fight for me," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He just did." William looked between them, his eyes sharp but unreadable, betraying nothing of his inner thoughts. He didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't offer any sign of forgiveness, but he turned slowly and walked back behind his desk. That simple gesture somehow said enough. Jake squeezed her hand, his breath shaky but relieved. As they exited the study together, Charlotte whispered, "You were perfect." Jake smiled slightly, his tension easing. I was terrified. She leaned into him, her heart swelling with pride. I've never been prouder of anything in my life. And for the first time since her mother's passing, Charlotte felt truly free. Because she wasn't just choosing love, she was choosing herself. 6 months later, the backyard behind Jake's garage was unrecognizable. Where there were usually scattered tires, rusted tools, and discarded car parts, now stood rows of folding chairs, strings of twinkling fairy lights, arrangements of wildflowers in mason jars, and a makeshift altar crafted from salvaged wood and old metal that Jake had painstakingly polished himself. It was simple. It was imperfect, but it was uniquely theirs, imbued with their love and shared vision. The guests were a diverse mix of worlds that would never have otherwise crossed paths. There were mechanics in rolled-up sleeves, friends from the neighborhood, a smattering of Charlotte's college classmates, and, surprisingly, a handful of men and women in tailored suits from the Whitmore corporate office. But the only two people anyone was truly watching were standing at either end of the grassy aisle, their presence radiating anticipation and hope. Jake stood beneath the altar, fidgeting nervously, wearing a dark vest over a crisp white shirt, his tie slightly crooked in the endearing way that Charlotte always teased him about. And then the music began, a gentle melody that filled the air with a sense of magic. Charlotte appeared from behind the garage, holding tightly onto a silver-framed walker for support. Her dress was elegant but simple, a flowing white satin that shimmered like moonlight with every step she took. Her golden hair was swept into a soft braid with loose curls framing her radiant face, highlighting her natural beauty. The guests stood, gasping softly as she made her way down the aisle. Each step she took was slow, measured, and absolutely deliberate, a testament to her unwavering determination. One foot, then the other. She wasn't being carried. She wasn't rolling in a wheelchair. She walked. Jake's eyes filled instantly with tears, his heart overflowing with love and admiration. When she finally reached him, he took her hand as if it were something precious, something never to be taken for granted, a symbol of their enduring bond. "You walk to me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Charlotte smiled, breathless and beaming with pride. "I told you I would." They stood before the officiant under the warm sun and surrounded by people who had doubted, disapproved, or simply hadn't understood their love. But none of it mattered anymore. In that moment, the only thing that mattered was their commitment to each other. Their vows were short, heartfelt, and honest. Charlotte promised laughter and unwavering partnership, even on the days when the weight of healing felt too heavy to bear. Jake promised safety, patience, and a hand that would never let go, a steadfast presence in her life. "I didn't fix your car," he said during his vows, his voice cracking with emotion. "But I promise to keep holding the pieces of your heart, even when they feel broken." When the kiss came, it wasn't met with polite claps and restrained applause. It was met with wild cheers, loud whistles, and an outpouring of tears, a celebration of their love and triumph over adversity. So many tears of joy, of hope, and of unwavering belief in the power of love. As the music resumed and the guests began to move toward the buffet tables laden with food, one man remained still, his gaze fixed on the couple. William Whitmore, Charlotte's father, stood just beyond the altar, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. Jake noticed him, hesitated for a moment, then approached slowly, bracing himself for whatever came next. William looked at his daughter for a long moment, his eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. He then shifted his gaze to Jake, his expression softening slightly. He didn't say much, just stepped forward, placed a firm hand on Jake's shoulder, and said quietly, "Take care of her, that's all." Jake nodded, his voice filled with conviction. "I will, sir. Always." It wasn't affection, it wasn't approval, but it was enough. It was a tacit acknowledgement of their love and a plea for her happiness. Later that evening, long after the chairs had been folded, the fairy lights had been taken down, and the leftover cake had been packed away, Charlotte and Jake stood at the edge of the ocean, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. They had driven out to the coast alone, seeking solace and tranquility in each other's company. The stars were beginning to appear as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden light over the waves. Charlotte stood on the wooden boardwalk, holding Jake's hand, her heart filled with a sense of peace and contentment. "Are you sure?" he asked gently, his eyes filled with concern and love. She nodded, her smile radiant. "I've waited 3 years for this moment." Jake helped her step down from the boardwalk, her bare feet slowly touching the cool, soft sand for the first time in years. She gasped, her eyes widening with wonder. "Just a little. It's real," she whispered, savoring the sensation. He smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You're standing on your own. First time since." "I know," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. Together, they walked barefoot, hand in hand, down to where the water kissed the shore, their footsteps leaving faint impressions in the sand. The ocean breeze wrapped around them like a blessing, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. Charlotte looked out at the horizon, then at the man beside her, her heart overflowing with gratitude. "This," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "is better than any ballroom or private island." Jake leaned in and whispered, "One step at a time. I've got you." She smiled, her eyes sparkling with happiness. And they stayed there, feet in the sand, hearts at peace, knowing that no matter where life led them next, they'd face it together, forever. Thank you for watching this heartfelt journey of love, resilience, and healing. Jake and Charlotte's story reminds us that sometimes the wrong table leads us to the right person, and that love, when true, sees beyond circumstances and societal expectations. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales for more emotional stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of the power of kindness. Hit the bell so you never miss a tale that could change your day, because kindness is the richest love story of all.